Hello and welcome back to the podcast that is always up to speed with Formula One. It is Thursday night. That means it is, one, almost weekend, and two, it's got a double meaning because there's a Grand Prix this weekend. Number three, it's even better because it's one of the classics. It's Italy, it's Monza. It's one of the races that we get really excited for. Anyways, Mark Squared here again tonight. I guess the square root of Mark Squared would be one Mark, but there's two of us, so I'm rambling. Anyways, we also have a very special guest joining us tonight, Mr. Vincenzo Landino. Vincenzo, welcome to the show, or should I say benvenuto. Welcome. So good to have you here tonight.
Well done. Well done. I like it. Glad to be here.
Well, that's awesome. So happy to have you. And Mark, you're looking very happy tonight. I don't know. I'm getting good. Like I say, I'm having good weekend vibes. We're having a little bit of fun. I think everybody's in a good mood tonight because NFL season kicked off. So unless you're a Cowboys fan, it was a good evening. But Tampa Bay, the ageless Tom Brady, nonetheless. How old is he now? 74, 78? I can't believe this guy's played, about like 93 seasons in the NFL. I mean, it's kind of like I guess one of those markers that summer's over and fall is here, but it's always a good weekend when
but Tom Brady never
back.
changes.
I know, right? Isn't that the weird thing? I mean, he doesn't look any different now. Anyways, as much as I'd love to sit here and talk football, that's what we're not here to do. We're here to obviously talk about football, or sorry, not football, Formula One. See, I told you guys before we started this was going to be a rough show because I've been so busy at work this week, but I'm going to be leaning on both of you. But Vincenzo, you bring a really unique point of view, and you have a really unique sort of skill set and experience, and we'll delve into all of that. But first of all, why don't you just introduce yourself to the listeners? And well, obviously, we had to have there's obviously no hiding your allegiance because for those of you that are watching the live stream will notice that he has a Ferrari polo shirt on. So I'm just giving that for the benefit of the listeners on the podcast. But introduce yourself and please tell everybody what it is and what you do.
Yeah, Vincenzo Landino. I'm here in the States. Recently just moved down to Florida, and I am I have a couple businesses. One of them being a media production company. We focus on video production. We handle a lot of video, digital commercials, digital ad work for some pretty large multinationals. That's the day job. That's kind of like what I do all the time. Also, my wife and I, we invest in creators. She's a creator herself. She's been on YouTube for a very long time. She's parlayed that into a career in speaking, writing. She's an author and coaching. So we've kind of taken that and started to invest in creators, at an earlier stage. And so that's our next little venture. But I don't even want to call it a pet project because it's really not a pet project. It's something that's really important to me. Something I've been working on lately a lot of is called the qualifier, and it's really the business behind sports. And I like to focus on Formula One, soccer, international soccer, European soccer. I'm I'm an Italian soccer fan, but I do enjoy all of European soccer. And so I'm focusing more into like the business and the stats and the numbers behind a lot of the stuff, as opposed to just the product on the field. Because as we all know, there's way more to all the sports than just the product on the field. So I've been diving into that, and that's something I'm ramping up, and I hope to ramp up over the next few months. And this is perfect timing because I love talking about this, and I love you guys, and so I'm here. I'm ready to be here.
That's awesome. May I ask whereabouts you are from in Italy and where your allegiances lie when it comes to club football?
So yeah, oddly enough, I am a Roma fan. I don't know why I became a Roma fan. I should be a Napoli fan. My family, my father, my parents are born in southern Italy, in a town in an area called Caserta. My father's in Gioia Sanitica. My mother, Faiki Benevento. They're neighboring towns. Benevento actually had a Serie A, the top flight Italian football club, last season. They got relegated. Um, but Napoli should be the team that I follow. And for some reason, I've always followed Roma. It is what it is. I still go that way. But as I've gotten older, much like with Formula One, I've enjoyed more of the sport as a
Mm-hmm.
whole in general, and I want to see success of the league, the leagues,
Mm-hmm.
and the athletes and the teams, as opposed to just blindly being allegiant to Roma or Ferrari. Even though I still enjoy the brand and the brands, there's something about the inner workings as I've gotten older that I appreciate more and more.
Yeah, that's certainly something I can identify with because I covered Major League Soccer and specifically the Vancouver Whitecaps here locally for many years. And when you start to get behind the scenes, and you get to see how everything kind of works together, it becomes a much more interesting picture. It's more than what happens on the field or on the track. So I completely understand that. That's really fascinating. So yeah, we really look forward to getting into this. And you just got back from Italy. You were there during
I
the
did.
Euro 2020. Was it
I did.
2020 or 2021 final? What with
They
COVID and
called it
everything?
2020. I've got my
Yep.
scarf back there, my
I love
Campione
it.
d'Europa scarf back there. I don't have. Well, I've got that back there. I've got some other stuff probably in the closet. We just moved, literally just moved, so a lot of my stuff is not out of boxes or luggage yet. But yeah, I was there for a little over a month, and we were there for the final, the Euro final, and we paraded through Rome with the rest of what felt like the rest of Italy. COVID apparently didn't seem to be a factor at that point for anybody because the Italians won the Euro championship. And so we were able to celebrate that and watch that there in Italy, which was an absolutely incredible experience. Fandom in Italy, which I know we'll talk about a little bit more later on in terms of F1, but fandom in Italy goes like next level.
Mhm.
When they say Italians, we are passionate people. It's in everything, whether it's food, whether it's cars, whether it's their fandom. They go all in, right? You're not just a fan. You are rabid, diehard, passionate. It comes through your pores, and you feel that. So yeah, that was an incredible experience. It was a month of just eating pasta every day. The last time when I was in Italy, I didn't eat pasta. This time I said, I'm going to have pasta every day. I'm going to do exactly what my cousin there, he's like, you got to eat pasta every day. I said, fine, I'm going to do it. Forget it. I don't even care what happens. I'm just going to do it.
You made a
And that
really
was it.
great point a couple of minutes ago, and you talked about, I think sometimes in Europe, I think sometimes your club identity and the club that you support is sometimes in your DNA. It's inherited from your family and your community
Mhm.
and things like that. And I'm really excited to talk about Formula One in that context as well, especially as it pertains to Italy, as you suggested a couple of minutes ago. We'll
Sure.
get to that. But I'm very curious in your case. Obviously, you have some really strong connections to Italy. But when did Formula One capture your imagination? How did you get brought into this ecosystem? And when did it start to excite you? Was it something that was kind of always there, or is it something that's kind of blossomed as a passion more recently?
So ironically enough, my father wasn't not a Formula One fan by at all. Um, not a motorsport fan, should I say? He'll watch it if I'm watching it type thing, but not like, okay, let's go to the racetrack. We did go to racetracks all the time. So we grew up in Connecticut, Lime Rock Park, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with.
Mhm.
We would go there all the time to watch all sorts of different, GT races and Porsche Day, Ferrari Day, Lamborghini Day. They do, we always went up for those. Um, and I think my dad did it probably because he realized that I really enjoyed it. I love anytime we went go karting and karting. I'd take it to the next level. It wasn't just like let's leisurely droll around the track. I'm like trying to race everybody. Um, but my uncle, I have an uncle who Formula One was his like number one. It was calcio and Formula One, probably Formula One above soccer. And we used to watch races together. Anytime I wasn't with my parents and I was, um, my uncle might have been watching us for a weekend and which was regularly, right? In an Italian family, like your uncles are like your second parent. It's not abnormal to be around your uncles and your aunts regularly. And he always was watching Formula One. So if I think way back, like I remember the the center race in San
Hmm.
Marino. Um, So I remember races, like I remember watching races back at that point. And then probably in high school, that age range, I kind of dropped off just for whatever reason, and then picked it back up after college. Um, but yeah, it goes back. So what, 93, 94? Like I remember avidly watching races on TV with my uncles, my brother, and just falling in love with these cars going really fast around a track and sometimes crazy things happen, but it was just like the sound of the engines, the you know the roar of the crowd. It was just different than watching a soccer match or a football game, um, where you. I know this is probably not the greatest thing to say, but like, there's not as much risk, and I know something about the risk, the adrenaline that goes into like driving a car at 300 kilometers an hour, that is just way different than running down the pitch with a soccer ball at your feet. And I've played soccer, right, my whole life. So I know what that feels like. There's something about Formula One driving that fast. It's not, and again, it's not, I don't want to offend NASCAR fans, but it's more than just like round and round in a circle. It is driving. It is driving a car at its absolute limit. Like there's something about pushing it to the limit that got me. And I think probably over the last 10 years or so, I've really started to appreciate it a lot more. And again, like I was talking about before this, I've appreciated more of the sport rather than like just Ferrari. Yes, I still love Ferrari, but I love Ferrari as a brand, and that's something that was instilled in me since I was young. Like Ferrari meant luxury, Ferrari meant speed, Ferrari means passion, Ferrari means Italian. Like
Yep.
that's what Ferrari means to me. It's not okay, Scuderia Ferrari, and that's the team I follow. It is, but it's also so much more, right? There's so much more that goes into it, and so um, yeah. Anyway, I could probably keep talking about that, but
It's funny because there's a couple of things that you said, Vincenzo, that really sort of resonated with me. I mean, I come from a Dutch family on my mom's side, and I lived in Holland for a number of years in my 20s. And, I've got lots of aunts and uncles. I mean, big family over there. And, we come from a Catholic family. And,
yep,
typically there's lots of kids, right? And lots of
yep.
aunts and uncles. And I specifically remember years ago at one of my cousin's house. And this is when we were all like, I was in my early 20s, and she's like the oldest cousin. She was like the first one to get married and everything. So she was kind of like the, sort of the one that was kind of like way ahead of the rest of us. And I specifically remember a family gathering at their place, and they wheeled the TV out onto into the patio so we could watch a Grand Prix. I can't remember which race it was, but I remember sitting there with a bunch of my cousins. I remember sitting there with my uncles and then her husband and his family. We're all sitting there, all the guys sitting there watching this race. And then my cousin, she came out and she took like one look at the screen. She just shook her head and she said, "I don't understand what you guys find so fascinating about this. This is the dumbest sport ever because it's just a bunch of cars going around in circles." And just the appalled silence that we all just kind of like looked at her. And then it was just like there was like we didn't know what to say. It's just like I think somebody just said, "Well, obviously you don't understand Formula One," and she said something to the effect of, "No, and I don't really care either."
Well, and that's the thing, right? There's you either get it and love it, or you don't get it, you
Yeah.
hate it, and there's nothing you can do to explain it. Um, which, and I want to probably bring this up again later on as we talk about Generation DTS, but I think things are changing. I do.
Mhm. Yeah, what a teaser that is, because I mean that's been an absolute game changer. Because it's funny that I have people that I know, like both not just family but friends that have had no connection or no
Hmm.
interest in Formula One, that nowadays, well, on a race day, will be texting me, or they'll be
Yes.
like, or even just texting me saying, "Oh, I started watching DTS, and this is like so amazing. I'm going to watch my first race." Or
Yep.
it's a really really fascinating phenomena, the way that it's really taken off the way that it has. I mean, I don't know if it was intentional, but I mean the way that I mean the series and the production obviously speaks for itself, but the sort of the organic growth and interest that it's achieved on its own is really quite phenomenal.
I think the Drive to Survive is the it's I'm gonna say the pinnacle. I don't know if that's the right word, but I feel like it is the pinnacle of content. If we want to talk about content right now, like creation, brand, the way a brand, when if I am talking to one of my clients, I'm pitching them something like Drive to Survive every time. I've
Hmm.
been, and I'm gonna brag on myself a little bit, but we've been pitching episodic series to our clients for a long time, especially online, right? Where you can control the narrative, where you can give people a glimpse at something that they otherwise wouldn't. And it doesn't have to be all about your brand. It can be about your customers. It can be about your employees. It can be about your competitors. It can be about anything and everything in your industry. And when Drive to Survive came out, I'm like, wow, somebody gets this. They understand what they're doing from the outset. I mean, it was very apparent what's going on with that series. And it is the perfect blend of reality TV, a little bit of massaged storylines, right?
Mhm.
Incredible story. The way they weave the story is incredible. Um, and just enough real life. Because I still, I'm thinking back now at season 1, and I'm thinking, how much did I, if I'm a newbie, did I actually remember? Like, do I know who won the season at the end of it? I can't remember. I genuinely can't remember right now. Do they leave you with like Lewis Hamilton won the championship? I don't think they do, right?
Well, it's really interesting because they don't the timeline, the way that they tell the stories, it's kind of generally follows the course of the season, but it kind of jumps around and kind of ultimately goes that way towards the end. But I mean, the way that they kind of they jump around like that and then still kind of keep that narrative flowing and still kind of keep it loosely in chronological order, I think is
Yeah.
really, really very, very clever the way that they've done it.
They jump around. They focus. I feel like they focus more on drivers and driver storylines between drivers, team drama, and then so it's almost like you have to watch each episode, kind of like The Walking Dead used to do this. They'd start
Mhm.
like episode 1 would everybody would be together. They'd have a timeline. You'd have a generic sense of like where they are in the timeline. But then the next episode, like episode 2, would focus on one character, and it would have the same timeline. It would have, a timeline. Then episode 3 would focus on another character, but it would be running congruent to,
Mhm.
or concurrent, sorry, to the previous character. And they would do that until, like, I don't know, they got to the end of the season where suddenly they're all back together. And I like that works really well with Formula One, because you have so many individual storylines amongst teams, amongst drivers, and kind of the sport itself, that really are independent of, like we were talking about before, it's off the field product, right? Off the track
Mhm.
product. And there's so much more going on that it really allows them to do that in a way that keeps people hooked. I mean, my wife wanted nothing to do with Formula One. We've been together over 7 years, and nothing. I wanted nothing to do with Formula One. I could never get her to sit for a race. Nothing. Now she's texting me. She was in Ohio. I had already moved down here, and she's like, "What time is the race on? Like, I can watch it, right? Can I use your F1 TV thing?" I was like, "Oh, you could just use ESPN or whatever. If you don't want to log in, And she's like, "Okay," all right. And like, then comes back and like actually talks about it. Did you see Lando? Did you? She likes McLaren. She
Yeah.
fell in love with Ricardo
I
because
love it.
of Drive to
I
Survive.
love it.
She literally fell in love with Ricardo, and I'm just like, whatever. Okay, fine. As long as you enjoy the sport, I'm happy.
That's so
They
funny.
did a really good job. There's so many people regularly. Like if you are not on Twitter, jump on Twitter and just search for F1, and you'll see people talking about it. I can't believe I was sleeping on this sport. I can't believe I never wanted to watch this. Now all of a sudden I'm setting alarms. I'm waking up the kids. We're all watching it together, and I'm just like, okay, cool.
Yep.
I know, Mark, I know we've got to jump to a break, but I just want to read a couple of excerpts from a really great article that came out in The Atlantic a couple of days ago by Amanda Mull. And I quote here, "In Drive to Survive, Formula One has found a way to convert Americans to a sport they have traditionally ignored. In the process, it may have hit on something even more valuable, something every American sports league is desperately seeking, a recipe for building and sustaining interest at a time when sports, facing all manner of new competition, are losing their grip on the nation's psyche." So it speaks exactly to what you're saying, which is through Drive to Survive. And that's really what this whole article is about, is it's untapped in interest in a sport that America didn't necessarily know it had. But Mark, maybe we leave it at that, and we can kind of pick
Sure.
up after the break.
Yeah, that's a perfect point to park it. So, guys, just as Mark said, we're going to jump to a quick break. So don't go away. We'll be back in just a moment. Okay, welcome back to the show. And well, I think that maybe I can start handing over some of the hosting duties there. Mark, I was just, I'm at a little bit of a loss. But anyways, joking aside, there's things that both of you had mentioned just before the break there that I just wanted to touch on. One thing that Vincenzo was just talking about, like the way that the story flows. I mean, just the way that the appreciation that I have goes back to basically to right from the very beginning when they didn't have the involvement of Mercedes, they didn't have the involvement of Ferrari and all those drivers. Yet that season one did not lack for anything. I mean, of course, it's a little bit different when you have to splice in archival news conference footage of Sebastian Vettel or Lewis Hamilton or any one of those drivers or team principals or whatever. But it didn't lack for anything, and I thought that was extraordinary. And then, of course, once they saw the benefit of being involved, seasons 2 and 3 just evolved from there. And I can't help but wonder if and when that Max Verstappen will get involved. But, being Dutch myself and knowing how stubborn Dutch people can be, that might be a long, long time before there is a softening of his heart to join the series. I guess obviously he has some issues with the way that some of the storylines are portrayed and stuff like that. I mean, they have to have a bit of artistic license, let's face it. And then there was another point I wanted to make, and I've completely forgotten about it now, but it will come back. Like I said earlier, it's been a brutally hard but short week, and we'll keep going. But Vincenzo, one of the things we wanted to talk about was the Liberty Media takeover of Formula One, and then them bringing the sport into the new era, because there's one thing that's really stood out in my mind for years, and this is going back pre-Liberty takeover. And I just remember hearing Bernie Ecclestone, I think he might have been interviewed on the BBC. It was definitely a European show. It might have been the Checkered Flag podcast or something similar. But he said at the time, and it was all because there was a bit of I wouldn't say controversy, but there was definitely a lot of discussion at the time about how drivers nobody could take moving pictures or videos or anything like that and post it to social media. And there was a lot of commentary at the time about how Formula One has to get into the modern age and embrace and go after younger, technologically savvy audience. And Bernie basically said, well, he wasn't really interested in that demo. He was more interested in the demographic of guy that's 70 years old and already has a pile of money. And I just couldn't help but thinking, and I'm paraphrasing and parsing here, of course, but I thought at the time that is just such an arrogant comment to make, because I mean, just by focusing on that one very narrow demographic of a guy that may be a fan for another 10-15 years tops, and he's completely ignoring this young generation. Liberty comes in, we see this expanded presence of the drivers and the teams on social media, and we see things like Drive to Survive, and just the way that they're not just pictures in a glossy magazine now, that you see them and you get to appreciate the personalities. And I think it's just added a whole layer and a whole new dimension to the appreciation and enjoyment that I have of the sport, because now it's not just a guy I see behind the steering wheel of a Formula One car.
Mark, I just want to add as well, because I think it's useful context. I kind of look at Formula One now as two eras. There's kind of the before Liberty era, Formula One BL, and then there's kind of Formula One after Liberty, like Formula One AL. And to back it up, like Liberty hasn't been in control of this entertainment property for that long. Negotiations really picked up steam in late 2016. Liberty was up against Stephen Ross and the Qatari government. Ultimately, they came to an agreement with Formula One. They closed in early 2017, and then they suddenly have this property. And like you said, the property was in so many ways saddled with so many of the bad decisions that Bernie had made. And I will give Bernie all the credit in the world for building Formula One up really from nothing. Like, I think we look back and we always assume it was this big financial monster that was just raking in revenues. That wasn't always the case. Bernie hit the lottery with his decisions and his strategy around TV revenue and raking in national TV deals and all those kind of pieces. But he really kind of lost his footing in the last couple of years there, because to your point, he was not only unrelenting in his attacks on social media, he refused to recognize that demo as valid or important to Formula One at all. So, we've all heard the stories about the fact that he used to have the Formula One front office send cease and desist letters to Lewis Hamilton, his top most transcendent star, for posting on social media, because his perspective was, Formula One lives behind an iron paywall. And if you want access, you pay for it. And if you can't pay for it, you're not getting access. So he was thinking very short term, like, we're appealing to our existing demo that's locked in. They're 50, 60, they're financially stable. And Liberty's taken this very different approach, which is, let's smash down that paywall. Let's make it accessible to everybody. Let's make it available to everybody. And let's embrace social media. And social media is a long-term play, in the sense that, hey, you're cultivating your future fan base by appealing to those 18, 20, 22-year-olds. But Vincenzo, this is really why we want to talk to you, because this is so much of what your passion is. From your perspective, since Liberty's come in early 2017, what are some of the great things that they've done to transform this entertainment property for American audiences?
I think the biggest thing, and the one I want to focus on, is allowing the drivers to have personality. I think this is what social media has done across the board, not just for Formula One. If you look at Formula One, it's very much a luxury. It's like a luxury good. It's like walking down the store and seeing Christian Dior versus Gap, right? There's nothing wrong with Gap. There's nothing wrong with Christian Dior. One is significantly more expensive. One has just a total aura about it, right? I'm using Dior, Vuitton, I don't care, whatever brand you want to use.
Lots of Italian brands you're mentioning.
I can change it up for you.
Burberry, make it Burberry. Speak to me. Speak to me.
One is Burberry, all right? One is I think the old way of luxury brands marketing themselves was to, like Bernie, remain exclusive. One of my lights went off. Remain exclusive, be behind a paywall. Only if you were 50, 60, yada, 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 you could access this. You could afford it. As social media democratized what these brands mean, and you started seeing, collaborations between brands online, brands needed to become needed to humanize themselves to some extent, because online their consumers were not just 50, 60 years old. Their consumers were 18, 28, 38, all across, the spectrum of ages. And so now, how do you speak to those people? The brands that did a good job were able to meet their audience where they're at. The brands that didn't were the ones that said, we're going to, keep going at it this, in this direction. And it sometimes didn't work. What Liberty did was essentially the same thing. They said, we are going to break down these barriers, like you guys mentioned, and we want as much access as possible. The more access, the more people talking about something, it's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Now, listen, are 13-year-olds spending the money on, I don't know, F1 TV? No, but their parents are. Their parents are the ones that, so it's an indirect way of acquiring a viewer or acquiring a fan. I can afford this stuff, but like a 13-year-old can't. They're going to ask their mom and dad. They're going to, so there's nothing. So that's okay, right? Like, just because they're not 60 and they don't have wads of cash in their pocket, what is the 60-year-old with wads of cash? What is that going to do for you? How is that going to necessarily, they're not going to talk about your brand, because you know what, one thing people don't do when they're at a certain level of status, they probably aren't talking about it. So it kind of stops there with them, right? And they only might talk about it within their circles, but like, where does it grow from there? Well, now you've got this whole group of people. I'm going to call them Generation DTS, because I know that your audience knows that. They're constantly talking about it. You can go online now and you will have people of all ages, all sorts of diverse backgrounds, races, everything, that are talking F1. it has become this. It's not even a it doesn't even signal like an exclusive club. It's like, hey, come join us. Come join this cool community. Like, this is a really cool sport. There's a big difference, right? Luxury exclusivity is very much a way to acquire people, but you're only going to acquire a certain amount. There's only a certain amount of growth there. It stops. You have to wait until people join that club to get back into it, right? If you're meeting your audience where they're at, Liberty's doing now, and they are saying, hey, this is an awesome community. Come join it. Let's all have fun together, and let's keep talking. Let's grow this thing. Here's the other thing: the teams are doing good, and I looked up some of the numbers on the popular F1 teams. Mercedes has the highest followers across the board, 23 million. Red Bull 21 million. Ferrari 15.5 million. McLaren 15 million. The rest of the teams combined, the 6 other teams, have 25 million. A lot of work to do, but if you look at Mercedes, success will always garner attention. Red Bull has an amazing community on and off, the track. So yes, they're going to grow just because they're Red Bull, and they do a lot of cool stuff. Like, did you guys see the video they just did? Max Verstappen driving through Palermo, Sicily, and all that. Like, that's really cool, right? The content they put out, Red Bull,
absolutely
amazing.
Yeah,
Ferrari,
absolutely.
Ferrari's a brand. Ferrari's a brand that's been around for a long time. Ferrari's got a lot. McLaren, I give McLaren a lot of credit because McLaren not only has had a long history in Formula One, McLaren has they actually make cars, so people know their cars. But I also give their approach to social media and gaming and esports with Lando a huge leg up. So that's where they're building their community. They also lead kind of all the other teams in TikTok. They've got 1.2 million followers on TikTok. The next closest is Red Bull with 1 million. Ferrari doesn't even have one that I could find. Mercedes has 513,000, right? So TikTok is creating this whole new viewer that's following them over there, and they create really cool stuff. It's funny. It's educational sometimes. Like, they did a whole thing on how to set up a pit stop, like the pit lane, and they literally broke it down in a TikTok. And I'm like, wow, this is actually mesmerizing. I'd never even realized it. So doing that that's backstage access. Tell me, the two of you, answer this. When before 2017 did you, like, unless you knew this, like you were working in a pit lane, did you ever know how they set things up? Like, did you ever see that behind the scenes look ever anywhere?
No. So
no, not really. No.
I just want to add, because you just made a really great point that just struck me, that prior to 2017, it was assumed you knew these things because it was part of this old guard of Formula One fan. And if you didn't know, you didn't dare ask. But I think that point about McLaren posting a TikTok, I can't remember if it was McLaren or Mercedes. I think it was McLaren, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, they posted that TikTok explaining how one of the functions of the sports operates. That would be like an NFL team today saying, hey guys, here's how a kickoff works, and here's the function it serves. You would never see that because we're not working to embrace a new audience, because everyone knows how football works. But I love and I respect the fact that
everyone knows how it works.
Exactly. Yeah. But I love the fact that these teams are acknowledging we've got this influx of new fans, and we want to embrace them, and we want to your point, welcome them into the community. And we're going to do things like this to help them feel more a part of that community and make the sport more accessible. So when we talk about accessibility, it's not just putting the races somewhere that people can watch them. It's making the rules and the regulations, and to your point, the drivers accessible. Like, you talked about the personality of the drivers. Like, that's something that Drive to Survive did so well, which is unlock the personalities, and as did social media, which is something, to your point, we never saw before Liberty. Like, all we would know is maybe a comment in the media. And again, the media was always tightly controlled by Bernie and F1, because no one who was credentialed wanted to lose access. So they were very careful with what they printed. And then what we would see in the media pen after the race, that's about all we knew. And then maybe something would get splashed in the tabloids. But I've been watching Daniel Ricciardo since he entered the sports. I know 10 times more about him now after Drive to Survive came out in 19 than I did before. I didn't like him, and now I love him.
And I want to I have a couple other numbers that I thought were actually really interesting. We can take this any direction. I also feel the same way about Ricardo, by the way. And Ricardo ended up doing a bunch of podcasts. I know he did the Armchair Expert with Dak
Right.
Shepard.
Right.
My wife loved that episode. Like, I had people texting me about that episode, like, "Holy cow, this guy drives an F1!" Like, I had no idea, and I'm like, "Yeah, what?" I mean, the thing was, I didn't know much about the guy,
Right.
but you did. Now you do. In China, F1 has communities on Weibo, WeChat, Tutino. I don't know if I'm pronouncing these correctly, and Douyin. They are up 133% in those communities. They've grown community
Wow.
of F1 to almost 2 million. 2 million. China has 2 billion people in it. So there's a lot of growth opportunities, but they're focusing on building communities on on these platforms. The social media views are up over almost 50% to 5 billion, 4.97, something like that. But they're also diving into podcasts as well. Their podcast Beyond the Grid, they've got over 14 million listens on that podcast, focused in the US, UK, Australia, and Canada.
Mhm.
I wouldn't say the US and Canada are, big strong, I mean, aside from Montreal, but like aren't huge strongholds for Formula One, but that's where a lot of their listens are coming from. So looking at those and seeing where their year over year growth, like audience growth is, China, 43%, the Netherlands, 28%, Russia, 71%. There's reasons for those, right? Like China, if they're focusing there and building community, that could help a lot. Maybe we might have a Formula One, a Chinese Formula One driver. Like that would be pretty cool. Russia there's a driver. There's a lot of things there, but being able to follow a person, a driver, more than just on the track I think that's how they're going to win. And they are winning. I mean, they are clearly winning. Anyone that's paying attention can see that there's a lot of buzz about F1 in every circle. It doesn't matter who you're talking to. I can bring up F1 now and people are talking about, I'm seeing F1 shirts at the gym. People are wearing like Formula One shirts. Walking down the street, I've seen caps. And I'm like, wow, I never saw that before, like ever. That to me is a signal without even having to really, really dive into numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of really good points that he made to Vincenzo. I just want to take a quick break here, and then we'll come back and talk about it. And before we do, I should I just want to mention that it's breaking news. Bernie Ecclestone is going to make a bid to rebuy back Formula One, and as part of the deal, he's going to let the drivers run their own MySpace account so they can still connect with their fans. So, anyways, I am being silly. Anyhow, time for a quick break, and Bernie is not buying back the sport, and we'll talk about that and more on the flip side. So please don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show and my spaceless trio of Mark, and Vincenzo Landino. And there was a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. We were talking earlier about some of the branding, the association with like the luxury goods and luxury brands in Formula One. And I always think it's such interesting when you see the start of qualifying or the start of the race for the formation lap. They always zoom to that big Rolex clock that they have on the side of the track and just all those sort of associations. And last week, Mark and we were talking about Talladega Nights and the Ballad of Ricky Bobby. And I always thought it was, and I know this is, this is Hollywood and this is, comedy, this is humor, this is satire. And I always thought it was interesting how like Ricky Bobby has, his racing suit has like the Wonder Bread logo on it. It's just like, it's funny how you associate different things with different sports with different brands and different things. I mean, of course, the Ballad of Ricky Bobby is, it's humor, but it done in such a way that, I mean, that image sticks with me, just like as much as a lot of these, luxury brands, stick in my mind with Formula One. But and a question here, a comment in the live chat on YouTube from Armando VR. And the comment is, for example, Real Madrid management have always said being a Madrista is a lifestyle. Do you think Liberty is selling something similar or something completely different? Vincenzo, what's your take on that?
No, Armando hit the nail right on the head. It is a lifestyle, but it's an accessible lifestyle right now. It is. I think Bernie was selling a lifestyle too. It was
Absolutely, he was.
It was a specific
Yeah,
lifestyle. It was
absolutely.
Monaco. It was Singapore. It was things that were, you're always like on the outside looking in.
Yeah,
That
we were
Yeah.
peeking into a lifestyle that we liked, but we could never afford.
Yeah, I was
sure.
just gonna say, what was the lifestyle that he was selling? Being like the old rich white guy? Was that what it
Yeah.
was?
It's
Yeah.
The one
yachts.
percent? Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
It's the yacht. Like
yeah.
I'm not
Yeah.
saying Monaco will go away, but I could totally see a time when if Liberty continues playing this out, Monaco, the race itself wouldn't exist. Won't exist. I think right now there's too many people that care about it from it's a sentimental,
Yeah.
nostalgic standpoint.
Yeah,
I could see a point where
absolutely.
it's like, this isn't even a race anymore. What are we doing here? Like, this
Yeah.
is not exciting for anybody.
Yeah.
Well, how many years do you hear afterwards that even the drivers are complaining like this is the most boring race that I've ever raced in my entire career, and I feel bad for the fans and yada yada yada.
I could,
And
I could even see it be some sort of sprint where it's just like the only thing we're gonna do is let the drivers go on the track and just do a fastest lap type thing, and that's the race. Maybe I'm
Yeah.
not gonna, I'm not gonna comment on that. I'm not a expert in that arena, but I can totally see them changing something up because the lifestyle that they're selling now, like I said, is more of a community. This is something we can rally
Right.
behind. This is
Mhm.
something that you're going to invite your friends over to watch. Like people watch football, right? Like I had my uncle stop by here earlier to watch the game because he lives down the street here. I
Mhm.
said, "Come on over, let's watch the game." We don't even. I don't like the Buccaneers. I don't like the Cowboys, but I like football, and so let's watch it. He's like, "Yeah, sure, no problem." We sat down and watched a little bit of the game before we started recording the show. We get together every Sunday to watch Roma, to watch the Steelers, to watch basketball, whatever it is, pick your sport. Same thing with Formula One for folks like us here that watch it already, but not for the normal person. It's like, oh yeah, I might flip it on my phone or whatever. But they want to create this lifestyle where like it is a communal brand.
Mm.
It's something you talk about. It's something that you want to get involved with. You want to wear the gear. You want to show it off. You want to kind of shout it from the rooftops the same way you do with other sports. Um, and yeah, so Armando's absolutely seeded a perfect, thought process there. They're selling a lifestyle, but they also right now they're changing what that lifestyle means to people. There's still, listen, unfortunately, there's still people that say, well, F1, like that's high society. It's going to, they're going to change that over time. And I didn't run any numbers to see like, I could run some numbers to see how they're faring against like maybe luxury brands or less luxury brands. What are the brand affinities there? I would be
Mhm.
curious. So that's a really good point that Armando brought up. But yeah, it's gonna have to change because if they're gonna continue with trying to build a community, you have to get different people.
You make such
Yeah.
a great point just in terms of that perception piece. And if we walk it back a little bit, Mark and I, we've been following it for 20 years. We've been to the races, but I think we both understood that 6 or 7 or 8 years ago, if you talk to the normal North American sports consumer, there was a perception of Formula One, and it wasn't a positive one. It was everything that we just
Yeah.
talked about. It was exclusive, inaccessible. It
Sure.
was designed and catered to a white Western European audience. The drivers
Mm-hmm.
come from wealthy backgrounds. It wasn't
Sure.
super inclusive. And I think so much of what Liberty's attempted to do is break down all of those barriers, like you said, and it's going to take time. But the little things like removing the concept of the grid girls, like they serve no purpose in 2018 except to make the sport less inclusive. And then,
Mm-hmm.
of course, working with Lewis Hamilton, you've done things to break down barriers to introduce new communities into the pathway to entering the world of Formula One. Like, I think the perception's still there, but I think it's rapidly deteriorating. And obviously, Drive to Survive was a big part of that. One of the questions I have for you, just from a branding perspective, and full disclosure to everybody, Vincenzo and I were talking last night, and he made a really great point that I wanted to capture for this podcast, which is in North America and in Europe especially, when it comes to team sports, typically your allegiance falls with a team for all the reasons that we talked about, because you grew up in a city.
Traditionally, yeah.
Yeah, because you grew up in that community. It was passed down through your DNA. NBA is a little bit different because the NBA has done a really great job of marketing stars, sometimes over teams. Vincenzo, in your perspective, North America especially, because I think for Mark and I, like for me, Williams was passed down from my grandparents. I know
Yep.
in a lot of communities in the UK and obviously in Italy, which we'll speak to, it's Ferrari. But from your perspective, What's happening in North America right now? What's happening in the US? Are people following drivers? Are they supporting teams? Is it a blend of both?
With Formula One specifically, I would say you're getting a lot of people. I like to use my wife as a perfect example because she is that perfect DTS consumer where didn't know anything about the sport before, knew that Ferrari was a car and that, we drove a Mercedes, like my husband drives a Mercedes. So I know that's a car, like cool. But beyond that, didn't know anything. So I like to look at her as a great example because DTS helped her learn about Daniel Ricciardo and McLaren. So what did she do? First of all, this is what she's doing. And for those of you that are watching, I'm going to display it, but this is what she's doing as she's watching. DTS, she's looking things up. She's following them on Instagram.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. She's checking out their Twitter if they have Twitter. What are they doing? Like, that's how people are consuming content these days. Sports in general. There's a second screen always with you. And so having that second screen experience creates this instant, you need to follow it up with something. So if I'm watching a sport on TV and I want to go look up an athlete and then they have no presence, or a team and they have no presence, I've probably lost interest. Again, I'm talking about someone who's completely new to something. Formula One is doing a really good job at marketing the drivers. Lando's got his own brand. He's got a gaming Team Quadrant. It's a lifestyle and gaming brand. Lewis does a really good job online. Daniel Ricciardo does a great job online. I would say drivers like Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc they do okay. A lot of it feels a little staged. And I think that's probably a Ferrari thing, which doesn't makes perfect sense. Pierre Gasly does a great job. George Russell does a great job. Like, they seem a lot more accessible. But again, this was not this wouldn't have happened 5 years ago, right? Like, this wasn't happening.
Totally.
But very much so, fans are saying, like, I like this driver. I'm going to follow this guy. It feels like people are following the sport more so than, first of all, you don't have a lot of drivers to choose from. There's 20 of them. And let's say there's probably 15 of them that are actually like going to stick around, right? Beyond this year. That's total. I don't even know if that's accurate. 15, right? It's probably all 15. And so you got to follow somebody, right? It's less about the brand because most people following now, like, they don't know the history of Ferrari. They don't know the history of Williams. Most people see Williams now and they're just like, that's a crap team. But you guys like you have no idea.
Yeah. Totally.
Or you'll see, you see Alpine, but they were, that was Renault. These teams have been rebranded over and over. Red Bull was associated with, a different, different engines, different power units, whatever. Like, there's so much mixture. So, like, no one, I want to say, like, they're starting at that without knowing anything. So the only thing you can say is, like, yeah, I like this driver, because the teams mean nothing to most people here. I would say it's akin to, like you mentioned, the NBA. NBA stars are bouncing around back and forth. Like, if you're a LeBron fan, and LeBron doesn't, he's bounced around quite a bit. But if you're a LeBron fan, like, are you really a Heat fan? Are you really a Lakers fan? Are you really a Cavaliers fan? Again, there's pockets of those who are, but most of them are like, I'm going to follow LeBron around. I'm going to follow, and that's pretty new, right? Because Lakers fans had Kobe, and, like, I'm a Lakers fan, but I'm also a Kobe fan because he's really good and he's awesome and this and that. The same thing with Shaq. The same thing with Michael. But Formula One just has this different catch, and I think the drivers are the catch. And Liberty does understand that. So what's happening is we're going to follow the drivers, and wherever they go, they go. I'm going to follow that driver. I like that guy a lot. I do. I personally, I'm a big Charles Leclerc fan, right? If he left Ferrari, I would probably still root for him elsewhere. I want to see him succeed. And that's, again, my evolution of my own fandom of the sport. But that's what's going to happen with someone else. Like my wife, if Ricardo goes somewhere else, she's going to be like, oh, well, okay, I really had no tie to Lando. I bought her a shirt the other day. It's like the Honey Badger. Barstool Sports made these like F1 merch.
Cool.
Unlicensed type stuff. But it doesn't have like logos or anything. It's like, it's branded for Ricardo. It's the honey badger. I had a shirt on earlier. The picture I sent you guys, I was wearing my Leclerc shirt, but it looked like a Ferrari patch,
Yep.
but
Oh,
it said
Yep.
Leclerc on it. So like Barstool, they do a really good job at understanding the psyche of their following, and they are, I would say, a very North American following. Well, they understand it's all about the drivers. It's all about
right.
branding and getting people to follow the drivers. So yeah, I mean that's happening. It's happening 100%.
It really is interesting too, because when it comes to like finding like F1 merch for your favorite driver or your favorite team, it's still in North America. It's really hard to find. I mean, Mark and I have talked about it from time to time that yeah, exactly. It's super pricey. I mean, I think we were both looking before the season when Aston Martin went and dropped their 2020 merch, and sorry, 2021 merch, and we were like, I wouldn't really mind getting an Aston Martin branded cap, for the collection. It's like 50 pounds or 50
Yeah.
euros plus about like 20 pounds shipping to get it
Mhm.
from the UK to North America. I was like, do I really want to be dropping close to $100 on a ball cap?
On a hat.
And yeah, exactly, right. And that's the thing. And that's one question that I've kind of like wondered is, to make it more accessible, and like it almost kind of goes against the DNA of Formula One. Maybe not going against it, but it seems a bit strange to see maybe go into Walmart and see like a range of like Mercedes Formula One team merch like hanging in the clothing section or something like that. But I mean, certainly you could see maybe something at Foot Locker or Champs or so, a chain like that, perhaps,
I'm with
right?
you. I agree. It should be there. Why shouldn't it? It's like any other sport, and it's probably not even that difficult to get because most of it is you have there's Ferrari merchandise if you walk into a Puma store or
Hmm.
um I, I go so when I go to the Mercedes dealership, they've got it. First of all, they've got Nico Rosberg in his Formula One car pasted right on, like in the service department. It is right there. They've got a ton of I don't want to say a ton, but a lot of AMG branded Petronas
Hmm.
stuff, and I'm like, okay, that's cool, but how do you get this out of here? And I think you get it out of there by making it just something that is probably driver centric, like you said, rather than brand centric. So if it's like,
Hmm.
hey, we're going to focus on the driver, I want to say like McLaren did this really well with, and this isn't exactly a merch setup, it's more on the esports, but like they built an esports studio at their headquarters, and like they really listen to Lando when it comes to like this gaming and esports. It's not a joke to them, right? So like if teams could listen to drivers collaborate on things like merch, I don't think it shouldn't be that difficult to provide merchandise in different areas, right? I don't know the
Hmm.
solution to it, but it just shouldn't be difficult to say like this doesn't have to ship from the UK. We can create this in North America or for North America. It could be the exact same thing. It doesn't have to, like, I get my F1 stuff, it comes from the UK or it comes from Italy, and it's just like, did it really have to come from, like, did it have to come from there? Like,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, for real.
like how badly do I want this? I mean, again, I'm a fan of the sport. I'm a fan of the teams. I love Ferrari. Uh, So it's a little bit different, but like the normal new fan is probably not going to spend money on that kind of stuff.
It's kind of funny you should mention that, because a couple of years ago, a friend of my wife, she was in Melbourne on holiday, and it was just a complete coincidence that she was there on the exact weekend of the Australian Grand Prix. And like she's walking around, and then we're sitting watching TV one night when the kids are in bed, and she gets a text from her friend. She's like, "Oh, hey, I'm walking around in Melbourne, and you guys like that Formula One thing, right?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm here and the race is on." And then she's just like, that. So, like my wife says, "Oh, Ada's," and she's walking around, and I'm just like, I'm like, "Yo, ask her if there's like a merch booth somewhere." so so that's what she did. So she actually, she was there, and so she didn't go into the track, but there were some different some different places around in the city. And so I had her for me pick up a Daniel Ricciardo hat. I figured
Nice.
it's that. And then my wife's a big Ferrari fan, so she got a shirt. But I mean,
She's the
that's
smart one in
typically
the
how it is.
family.
Yeah, exactly, right. Yeah, I'll never contradict that, especially in front of her, because I'll die. But that's typically how it goes when it comes to getting F1 merch. It's like
Yeah.
either you spend a lot of money and ship it over from Europe or whatever,
Yep.
or typically typically then, you know, if you're lucky enough to have a friend or a family member that makes a trip or is coming for a visit or whatever, it's just like, hey, you know, I'll order this, I'll ship it to your place, or can you pick this up and bring it with you?
Yeah.
Kind of thing. And that's typically, I'm just like kind of thinking in the 21st century, does it have to be this difficult
No.
to get a t-shirt or a hat or
shouldn't.
whatever it might be?
Yeah, my sense is I think you got to imagine the retailers, the Dick's Sporting Goods, the Foot Lockers, the Champs, anyone else that could potentially distribute this stuff is probably looking at what's happening right now. And they've got their merchants, their buyers tapping on the door of every vendor saying, what can we do to start getting this stuff into our brick and mortar location? So my sense is I think there's probably a little bit of, I think that when you talk about supply and demand, I think there's demand and there's just no supply. And I think that'll get fixed. But I think we have seen some inroads over the last couple of years. Fanatics, who's obviously a major distributing of licensed sporting apparel in the US, has some presence online now. The challenge is the pricing is still absurd by US dollars. Like I'm looking at the Fanatics site right now. A Mercedes branded Mercedes AMG F1 t-shirt is $70 US. Like I think if you walked up to a new Formula One fan in the US and said, hey, a t-shirt's $70, they would probably laugh in your face. Like, I want to support, I want to be a part of the community. I'm not spending $70 on a t-shirt. I'm used to spending $70 on a jersey. I'm not spending $70 on a t-shirt. So I think the market will adapt. I know we got to cut to a break here, but before we do, I wanted to share a story and get your take on something else that you were intimately familiar with long before I was. But a few months ago, I came to discover that Topps was producing trading cards for Formula One. And when I found out about this, I actually put a call into a local sports memorabilia shop. And I said, hey guys, do you have any of these really great new Topps trading cards? Oh my gosh.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, do you want to describe to the listeners what you're holding up?
I'm holding up a Topps Chrome Max Verstappen. This is the number 6.
Wow.
This is like considered his rookie card. I believe this is this was after they commemorate his win or whatever at Silverstone in 2020.
Wow.
And he earned driver of the day, blah, blah, blah. But they took this photo. So it's a blue like refractor. It's a kind of a rainbow. So for those of you that are looking at it, you can just go look up Max Verstappen number 6, Topps Chrome 2020, and this will pop up. It's a blue. He's just kind of standing there, hand on his hips. But
crazy.
This card is, I think it's worth about $300 raw like this, not graded.
Mm-hmm.
But a blending of the two conversations we were just having, plus what you just said, I can't get these in the US. They come from the UK. So card shops might be able to get them. So there's a card shop back. I'm from Connecticut. I mentioned I go back home to visit my family. There's a card shop, hobby shop, local there that we used to go to as kids all the time. I walked in and I said, do you have any Formula One stuff? He goes, some guy just walked out with one. I said, just one? That was the last one you had? He goes, oh no, he bought the whole case.
Wow.
That was it. He goes, I'll probably not see another Formula One thing for the rest of the year or 6 months. And I was like, damn it. So the guy bought the whole case. I believe it was the Topps Chrome. But yeah, so this is another form of, I believe, merchandise / memorabilia. It's still very difficult to get. I mean, I do order cards from the UK all the time. I get my Formula One. I also get my European soccer ones from the UK as well. Actually, I think the Formula One ones come from Italy. I do believe the Formula One tops are, I want to say they came from Italy. And I think they come from Italy, but it's like the UK site. Anyway, still not easy to get, right? So like most people wouldn't know nor understand nor care to purchase that. Like trading cards is huge right now.
Mm-hmm.
Formula One trading cards is still like way under the radar, but they're still pulling decent numbers. Like on eBay, they're still moving quite a bit, which to me signals really good things.
Well, I think my story is, and how naive I was, but I called this memorabilia store. I'm like, hey, do you have any of these cards? And they're like, yeah, we got one box. I'm like, well, how much is a pack? They're like, we don't sell them by the pack. We sell them by the box. I'm like, okay, well, you know what? I'll splurge. I'll spend the $80 on a box. I'm like, how much is the box? $800.
$800,
yeah. $800. And the whole point was we were doing this stunt where we were going to open a pack live on the air. So I ended up buying a pack on eBay for $60. Like a single pack, 4 cards, $60. But the demand is incredible. But I think what's innovative and cool about this is obviously, and we can talk about why sports cards are so big in the US right now. And it could be because of the asset bubble and there's so much cash being floated out and being printed and people are putting it into collectibles. Yep. But the fact that F1 cards have picked up momentum in the US is pretty crazy. And I've been in that memorabilia store a couple times since, and they sold that box almost instantly. But both times I've been in there were customers in there asking, do you have any Formula One cards? Yep. And they're like, nope. And we're not going to see any more. We have to wait to see if they do another run next year, which I thought was incredible.
Yeah. I was meant to ask you, Mark, what was the shopkeeper's kind of, attitude towards it? Did he seem warm on it, or was it just kind of these things, I'm just bringing them in because people are asking for them? Did you get
so my perspective was they were surprised and they took a box because their distributor had kind of coerced them into doing it. Like, hey, this could be a pretty hot thing. And they're like, you know what? It's one piece. We know that there isn't going to be a ton of availability. We know that there isn't a lot of allotment or allocation coming to North America. We'll grab it. But I don't think they expected that they were going to sell the entire box at 800 piece. Like, I don't think they were expecting that at all. But I also thought it was really interesting that, again, like I said, both subsequent visits that I went to that store, there were people looking, which I thought was just fascinating.
Yeah, that is really interesting. Hey guys, let's just park it here. We'll take a quick break, and when we come back, there's still lots of things to talk about, including actual Formula One news. We haven't gotten to it yet.
There's
been some big F1 news this week. Yeah, we'll do that in just a moment. So don't go away. We'll be right back. All right. Well, welcome back to the show. And before we get to the actual news of the week, of the day, and look ahead to the Italian Grand Prix on Sunday. Now, this is something interesting, and I kind of wanted to pick up on this partly because one of my best friends works for EA Sports. He does a lot of the social media for the FIFA franchise. But the one thing that Mark, you had wanted to discuss with Vincenzo was the Formula One game, the official one that's been done by Codemasters, that's been taken over by EA, which I keep bugging my friend that, being an EA employee, I'm expecting an employee discount when I buy one because, hey, I'm cheap. Anyways, kind of building on what we were talking about a little bit, or you mentioned it briefly, Vincenzo, was just Lando and his the esports and all that sort of thing. How important do you think that this whole esports and the gaming is to Formula One? I mean, I think they're both kind of interlinked. Just the game itself as a property that people, because I buy it, I play it, I enjoy it. But then, of course, esports is a thing itself. It's just like my buddy Jorge always says. He says, basically, I make a living off of generating social media and hyping up teenagers playing FIFA, and which is cool. But what's your take on that?
Yeah. Well, esports itself is, projections for the industry at like esports as a whole is through the roof. I mean, they're looking at, I think 2 billion was projected for the industry, I believe. Maybe it was 1.8, 2 billion, something like that, by 2022. There's a lot of opportunity there. You have opportunity with esports to, we were talking earlier about luxury brands being exclusive and communities being inclusive, right? F1, you create a community. Not everybody can drive an F1 car. Not everyone can drive an F2, an F3 car, karting, like there's 20 drivers. There's 20. And there's like, maybe let's say 10 of them that are the absolute just highest echelon of talent in the world, right? Well, Mark and Vincenzo are not going to be riding in driving a Formula One car anytime soon. But you know what I can do? I can go jump on my PlayStation with my, wheel and pedals, and I can get a lot of the feeling of driving the car without any of the risk. It costs nothing aside from the game and the equipment and whatever. Let's say $1,000 to go and drive an F1 car with very realistic mechanics, very realistic tracks, very realistic, response in your setup. that to me is a huge opportunity for Formula One to keep diving into. And I read like I read a lot of the Reddit threads around the F1. There's like an F1 game Reddit subreddit. And I mean, people like just go crazy for this stuff. They absolutely lose their minds for adjustments in the game. I mean, people are like tweaking cars and adjusting, all sorts of, suspension and aerodynamics. And they're like talking about, how did you hack the game to do that? I mean, like people are hacking the game, like things that they do that you would think are only like shooter games and like those types of things. Like, no, there's, FIFA. This is very much on par with any of those. Maybe it doesn't get all the love that FIFA or some of the shooters get, but there's a huge community there. I don't know the numbers of it off the top of my head, but like just from what I'm seeing, especially like Reddit's a great, for me, I use Reddit a lot to really gauge where there's a lot of interest, raw interest. And I think there's opportunity there. I mean, listen, F1 teams lose money regularly, right? Like they're not there to generate a lot of money. Maybe Mercedes generated some money, some actual profit, right? But you have an opportunity to actually generate revenue with esports. So the same way a lot of like NFL or NBA teams, Major League Baseball teams are now, they have their own esports team.
Right.
Formula One teams can do the same thing. And McLaren, they're working toward, either they're working towards or they already do have one. But I know they're working with Lando to really build that up. And why not set up leagues? This is ideally, I would love to see an F1 season, F1 esports season, where you have your F1, like each Mercedes, they bring on two youngsters, two drivers that are gamers, and that like they compete every week or whatever, however they set it up against the same thing. Like that to me is such an opportunity, more opportunity for sponsorship, different kinds of sponsors. Like we're already seeing crypto sponsors and a lot of these tech sponsors from the US. Like that would grow exponentially if they added on a league, and relatively inexpensive, right? Because you don't have to have these massive tracks and safety regulate. There's none of that. All of that goes away. The overhead in business terms, I don't want to say is almost zero, but hell, it's almost zero. Like you don't even have to have these drivers go anywhere. They could technically do it from their own like studio, right? If you really want to do it that way. And it can be streamed to probably just as many people that are watching the races here in the US, which is, we're right around that 1 million mark right now. Like the numbers, like Lando, he has about 1 million followers on Twitch, and he's not even the biggest name in the sport, right? But he's doing about 1 million followers on Twitch, and he's doing about 100,000 concurrent live viewers every time he goes live. That's just Lando. Imagine a league, right? An F1 game league where every driver has probably exponentially greater followers that Lando has. Like that's where my head goes with it. And that just brings on more people that want to play the game, more recognition for the game itself, for the sport itself, for the drivers, for the teams, seeing the prancing horse, seeing the Mercedes logos and the Aston Martin logos, and seeing all of that in the game. Like that brings awareness. And the difference between Ecclestone and now Liberty is the fact that one understood that awareness actually means something long term,
right?
And the other didn't. And so the game, I mean, getting the game into someone's hand, whether it's here or PlayStation or computer or whatever it is, it's I want to say it's just invaluable. You can't put a price tag on it, because now you're putting it in front of people, you're blasting them with it. Even not there, like the races are only 1 day a week plus if you're a fan enough, you're watching Saturday and Friday. Well, now I'm playing my F1 game and I'm being blasted with Mercedes logos and Red Bull logos for 7 days a week.
Mark, I know you are dying, and so am I, to get to the driver news, but I wanted to just add one more piece to this.
Mark's I just want to talk about Formula One, actually.
I know, like, whereas you and I are like deeply into this conversation about branding and marketing, but the one thought I had is we get a common question from our listeners, which is, can you recommend a sim setup for me? And when I first got into this whole podcasting world, I'm like, what the hell is a sim setup? but it is legitimately people building simulators at home to replicate the Formula One experience. And the Formula One game affords you the opportunity that NBA 2K doesn't, that NHL 2021 doesn't. Like, those are video games. They're top-down video games. You see everything that's going on. You pass the puck. But when you play the Formula One video game, it is a simulator. It is simulating the experience. Like, the closest analogy would be like, it would be NBA 2K, but you're playing it three-dimensionally through the eyes of one of the players. But that's not what it is. But in Formula One, you are experiencing a race through the eyes of a driver. And with every iteration, it gets better. And then you have these folks, and I went to the Best Buy website, like, they're now selling the gear, they're selling the chassis and the chairs and the mounts for the TVs and the steering wheels. But
you need literally like a dedicated room for this stuff.
Yes. Yeah, we have people like that are asking us. I'm like, dude, like, I don't know. But people are sharing with us like, hey, what do you think of my new sim setup? It's got a 50-inch 4K TV and it's got this. I'm like, that is incredible. That was 20 grand. But people are legit trying to replicate the Formula One experience because it's unique. Like, you don't get that experience with any other sports video game.
And 20 grand is nothing considering how many millions does it take to go and try and be an F1. First of all, you can't be, I couldn't go and be an F1 driver now. You guys couldn't go and be F1 drivers right now, right? If you didn't start when you were younger karting, like, it's probably never going to happen for you. Well, hey, you know what? I can go spend 20 grand. I can go spend 20 grand on a vintage Porsche, or I can go spend 20 grand to ride around year round, you know, in a Formula One car. Like, it's kind of a no-brainer for some people, you know, like, listen, I would love to have a cool setup like that and race all the time. I just don't have the time.
All I'm hearing is spending 20 grand on this or spending 20 grand on that would equal a divorce. And no matter where I drive the 20 grand, especially if it was something completely selfish for myself like that. But, you know, I have to, like, you know, pick my jaw off of the floor, because I mean, the fact that some people are that dedicated and spend that sort of money is incredible. But it really is a cool phenomenon. There's just before we cut to our final break here, guys, like, I just wanted to mention one thing. And, you know, I talk about the esports thing with my buddy a lot, and I forget the numbers now, because this is pre-pandemic and everything kind of pre-2020 is a bit of a blur. But I remember him telling me that they had one of their finals, and he used to travel all over the world to these different FIFA competitions and stuff like that. But they put one of their finals, it was on ESPN2 or something like that, on Super Bowl Sunday. And I can't remember the numbers that it drew, but it ran parallel to the Super Bowl. And I can't remember when it peaked, but they were stoked because the numbers were massive, that not only did they get the amount of viewers that they did, but they did it on Super Bowl Sunday, which, you know, is the one Sunday of the year where everybody watches, you know, what's happening, in the game itself. So it was really just incredible. Anyways, one final break. When we come back, it's an hour and 10 minutes into the show, and we're actually going to talk about some Formula One news. But it's been a great conversation so far with our special guest, Vincenzo Landino. And we'll pick up on the flip side. So guys, don't go away. We'll be right back. Okay, welcome back to the show. And Mark, I know you've been dying to talk about this ever since last weekend, as well everybody else. But, you know, it was funny because when you texted me the news about Valtteri, officially leaving Mercedes and going to Alfa Romeo, I was out on the bike and I was waiting for my brother to catch up at the top of a hill where we were riding, and I pulled out my phone. And the first thing, because I wanted to see, because sometimes my kids will text me when they wake up, because we get up super early in the morning. We'll go out at first light, and the first thing I see is, it's official, Valtteri's going to Alfa Romeo. And it's just kind of hinting at how soon will it be before they drop the news that George is going to replace him at Mercedes. But it was kind of that first piece, that first domino that needed to fall in the whole driver market. And there's been some obviously some big news this week.
Yeah, absolutely incredible week. And I think this is what you and I especially was really speculating was going to happen throughout the summer break, that we've got this 4-week period. We'll probably get a better sense of what's happening from a driver market perspective during the summer. It didn't happen. In fact, it really took until about a week ago for that first proverbial domino to fall. And surprisingly, that domino was Kimi Raikkonen, because I think a lot of people understood that maybe he wanted to stick around, maybe maybe he had another year in him, but he retired last week. And we talked a lot about that during the podcast. But that was the opening for Valtteri Bottas to move over to Alfa Romeo. It's where he wanted to be. It's generally widely reported that he also had some pretty intense conversations with Williams. Williams was very interested in bringing him back. And for those that you don't know, he had some real success with that team in the years leading up to 2016, scored a plethora of podiums, helped bring Williams into, I wouldn't say championship contention, but into the top 4 in 2014, the first year of the turbo hybrid era. He had the opportunity to go back to Williams, chose to go to Alfa Romeo. Great move for him. And like you said, that created the opening, the vacuum for probably the worst kept secret in all of Formula One, which is young British phenom George Russell will be going to Mercedes next year. So I think a question for both of you, what do you think Bottas's legacy is going to be with Mercedes? He was there for 5 years, joined them in 2017 after the shock retirement of Nico Rosberg. What do you think his legacy is ultimately going to be with Mercedes?
Well, I think he's the ultimate teammate to Lewis Hamilton. I think he's the guy that also helped them win, I guess, 4 or 5 championships in a row. I mean, incredibly consistent. I mean, not a guy that was going to take a lot of races away from Lewis, but was going to win the occasional race here and there. And most importantly for Mercedes and for Lewis, guy that got along with everybody in the team and was not going to perpetuate that toxic atmosphere that existed, in the Nico Rosberg era. Because, I mean, no doubt the guy's competitive, but I don't think he was willing or necessarily has the personality to get really nasty like the way that it got between Lewis and Nico. And I mean, how many incidents did we see between Rosberg and Hamilton over the years? I mean, has there ever been a Bottas Hamilton collision? Not even close, right?
Never.
Yeah.
No,
Vincenzo, what you agree with that? Or
I was gonna say, I do agree, and I think not only the ultimate teammate, but really he gave them he gave Mercedes the best opportunity to win the championship and win the both constructors and the drivers championship, because he could put pace. I mean, he was fast. I mean, he regularly was putting up, he wasn't putting up poles, but he was putting up fast laps, during qualifying regularly. He's putting up fastest laps, around the circuit during the races. We just saw it last week. They were like, don't do it. Hold abort
right.
fastest lap. He still got, but I mean, I'm looking at I just pulled up his championship numbers right now since he's been with Mercedes. I mean, he's finished 3rd, 5th, 2nd, and he's currently 3rd. 3rd, 5th, 2nd, and current. I mean, if this was any other driver on any other team, we'd be like, this guy's great. This guy's great. But for some reason, and I think on the flip side of what you were saying, Mark, I think he just gets a bad rap because either Mercedes expects more. I don't know how you can give more. Like, I don't know how he can give more than, okay, so he could have finished 2nd instead of 3rd, and he could have finished 2nd instead of 5th. But then he finished 2nd the last 2 years, not 2019, 2020. He literally finished 2nd. He can't do any more for you unless you want him to win. So, I think he did get shafted. He got the short end of the stick. But I don't know if he is a number 1 driver. I don't know. But he does seem like such a great guy, like a guy I'd want to hang out with. And I wish him the best at Alpha. I think he's the perfect guy right there for a younger driver to kind of show him the ropes. As long as they give him a decent car, I think he'll put up some good numbers. Where's he going to bring Alfa Romeo? Like, I don't know how high up can you bring Alfa Romeo right now, but his legacy. It'll be interesting to see how people talk about him. I mean, Lewis praised him, the team praised him, but like, I don't know. I seem to think like the actions during the race never seem to match what the announcements they make afterwards. So I'm like, do you guys mean that? Because man, you seem to always screw him on the track. So.
I know, right? And I think the thing that's good for him too is he finally got more than a 1-year deal. I mean, he's been on this rolling 1-year contract with Mercedes for years and years and years. He's reunited with Frederick Vasseur, which was his team boss in the junior series.
Yeah,
and they obviously have some designs on kind of pulling themselves up through the grid somewhere, and having a guy like Valtteri there, And well, I know they haven't confirmed who might that second driver would be. At least, I haven't checked all the news today, so I hope they haven't come out here to prove me wrong. But it is, I think it's good for him. And Vincenzo, like you say, he's not a number one guy at a team like Mercedes, but definitely a number one guy at a team like Alfa Romeo. And for a guy that's going into his mid-30s, I think it's a good move for the point of his career where he's at.
He'll give them consistency that they need.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think both of you absolutely nailed it, right? For all the criticism that he received, he helped them win 5 constructors championships. He did exactly what was asked of him. Every year that he was there, they won the constructors. And every year that he was there, he gave Lewis the opportunity to win the driver's title. And I think you're right in the sense that if he was much more competitive, maybe it introduces that friction and that toxic culture that we experienced with Nico. So, we can criticize him. He gets to walk away at the end of his career having won 5 constructors championships. He got to win 9 Grand Prix with Mercedes. He got to be around a winning culture and have the opportunity to win week in and week out. I don't think this was a failure. I think it was a great acquisition by Toto, and it came at the exact right moment too, because for anyone that remembers 2016, Mercedes may have won both of the championships, but it was a season that was absolutely burdened with drama and internal friction. And they were able to dispense all of that by bringing Valtteri. He was the right guy at the right time. He helped rebuild the culture, and he delivered exactly what they needed on the track. So I think for me, I look at his career, obviously there were mistakes and there was instances where you could challenge his pace and things like that. But ultimately he did exactly what the team wanted him to do. And to your point, Mark, he wants some security. He deserves some security. He just turned 32 and now he gets that 2-year deal with Alpha, and he gets to go in and be a lead driver and help potentially bring along a young driver next to him, which opens up the next big question, which, Mark, I'm dying to hear your thoughts on this one, because you and I have been talking about this for a year now. George Russell is going to Mercedes. He's going to be partnered with Lewis. We know they're going to race together for at least 2 years. The length of Lewis's contract, or Lewis's most recent contract. Your thoughts? Is this deserved? Because that's the debate in the F1 community. Is it deserved? Should he be getting the seat? Has he done enough? And if he has, is he going to put a little bit of heat on Lewis next year?
Well, that's fascinating. That certainly is the $64,000 question. I mean, just like you said, Valtteri was the right guy in the right place at the right time. I think that George is the right guy at the right place at the right time, at least if you're George Russell. I mean, he's done well in a team with a car that obviously is a bit of, more than a bit of a lemon. And I mean, we've seen how good he can be in qualifying. And the thing is, I mean, from his point of view, I mean, he is in the perfect place because he gets to go and race with one of the greatest drivers of all time. He's going to a team that has unlimited resources. It's a team that is obviously a perennial contender. And if you're George, you just have to trust in yourself. And I mean, you have to think, well, if I didn't have talent, if I didn't have potential, why is a guy like Toto Wolff coming along and offering me a deal to come and race for his team? Because I mean, let's face it, not is he only there to help win the championship, the constructors there, and maybe even a championship of his own. I mean, he's there to take over from Lewis, because Lewis obviously is not going to race forever. I mean, the big question is now, is this the last Formula One contract that he's ever going to sign? And at some point, I mean, he obviously has other interests away from the sports. He doesn't have to prove anything else at this point. I mean, he's racing because he obviously still enjoys it. He doesn't need the money. And George, I think, he has to be considered the heir apparent. And I think very much like Valtteri, I think that they've brought in a guy that has, helped contribute to that positive atmosphere there. And I don't think he's going to want to rock the boat, because I think that we really made I think we were a little bit cynical about it a couple of weeks ago, that that radio message that he made about when he wasn't really in contention the race, and he was like, oh, bring Nick in. Nick's doing so good, like you can sacrifice my race for Nick. And we're just like, we were kind of joking about the time. It's like, was this like really sincere, or was he just kind of trying to upsell himself to to look good to like a potential employer? Yeah, Vincenzo, I see a lot of like nodding in agreement. What's your thoughts?
No, I think the difference with Nico and Lewis in 26 are in their time together. They're the same age, which is, I think, a very different. It's very
They're
different
peers.
than where Lewis and George are. And
Mhm.
so I think George is much more competitive than Valtteri. He
Yeah.
absolutely wants to push. He's younger.
Yeah.
He wants to push the car. He wants to drive it to its very limit. I mean, you could see even the way he brakes and things like. I mean, he's very, very aggressive, which is great. I don't foresee the same issues with Lewis interacting with each other simply based on the age. Like, hey, it's a seniority thing. I'm the greatest driver. Not that Lewis is saying this, but like at least in George's mind, like he's seeing this man, Sir Lewis Hamilton. He's freaking knighted for who I'm just George Russell. I'm just this young kid who's got to kind of grind my teeth and whatnot. So I think the relationship is different because there's just a different dynamic right now. Lewis has this status that is, much different than where he was in 2016. So I think for that, it'll be smoother sailing. I am curious to see though if George will push it. If is Mercedes going to let him win some races? If he of course drives that well. That'll be very interesting for
So
me.
Vincenzo, you nailed it. And sorry, I got to jump in here because you just hit on something that I'm super excited and emotional about because I want to see how it plays out. I think you touched on something great that you can't compare Nico and Lewis to George and Lewis. Nico and Lewis were peers. They grew up together, they raced together, they karted together, they competed in all the lower formulas. And you have to remember as well that Nico had been at Mercedes for several years before Lewis got there. Like he was as much Mercedes at that point as anyone else was. Like Lewis was coming to his team and then experienced all that immediate success. This is a different story. We're talking about two drivers that have a decade difference in age. We're talking about worlds of difference in experience. But I think you touch on a really great point, which is one, I would expect, I think whether any of us believe George deserves this, whether he is the up and coming prodigy that the British media likes to portray him as, I expect him to 100% come in and deliver more pace than Bottas. And Vincenzo, I think you touched on the best possible question is, this is all great. They're going to be super friendly. They're going to be chummy. They're going to say all the right things in the press. The British press is going to love this, having two great British drivers on the same team. But what happens the minute that all of a sudden George has got better pace in a race and he's right behind Lewis and the team has to make that decision? Do they let them race or do they deploy team orders? That's what I cannot wait to see because that's where
if it's Valtteri, they'd pit him, right?
Exactly.
Valtteri, or they would deliberately screw up a pit, and it's hard not to believe that that's what's happened with George. Is he the second coming? I don't know. They seem to think he is. I like him. I just don't know if he's at the. I mean, the British media is unrelated, but I saw someone make a comment about British soccer. I think it was the soccer player Xavi, and he said, if I was British, or if any of these people were British, they would be the second coming if they had one good game. Like if you have one good game, the British media just thinks you are a legend. And so I think it's the same thing with Formula One. It's like, man, you have one good race, or you show one good thing, like you are the greatest thing. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But I wish nothing but the best for George. I hope he dominates it. I just hope Mercedes doesn't botch it with the two of them.
I just, maybe this is just me being me and just being, kind of weird, but I just couldn't help but think that, if we see something like George is, going to be faster than Lewis and they deploy team orders, I thought very much like of the Charles Leclerc and Sebastian Vettel in Australia a couple of years ago. They had this mental picture of that happening, and then Charles getting on his phone after the race is like, "Bro, call me." Yeah, we could talk about this.
They'll have a WhatsApp grabber.
Oh, yeah, man. That's right.
So the other big driver story that we absolutely have to talk about, because this is something I didn't see happening 6 weeks ago, 8 weeks ago, a month ago. I think it was assumed that obviously if George Russell was going to make the transition to Mercedes, that was going to open up a seat at a Mercedes customer team in Williams. And I think it's been pretty well understood that Williams has really solicited or accepted a lot of feedback and guidance from Mercedes over the last 4 or 5 years in terms of who's going to be piloting their cars. And I think the assumption this entire time, at least for folks like me in the content creation world, was that if George Russell steps out, Mercedes has another talented young driver who won a Formula 2 championship, has now won a Formula E championship, Nick de Vries, who would step in and fill that seat. It works for Mercedes. He's a Mercedes driver. He stays with a Mercedes customer team. It's perfect. That's not what happened. Over the course of the last couple of weeks, Williams got very, very, very excited about a different driver, a member of the Red Bull family, and Alex Albon. And ultimately, against what's been reported as the better wishes of Mercedes, they did sign him. Now, he had to relinquish his Red Bull contract, although Christian Horner and Helmut Marko are quick to note that they have options to re-sign him if he does opt to leave the Williams team. But ultimately, we have this really curious dynamic now where Nick de Vries still doesn't have a seat. Mercedes clearly isn't happy about that because they've now shut down their Formula E program, which is where they'd had him stashed away. And now all of a sudden you have a Red Bull driver who's been out of the sport for a year coming in to take a seat at a Mercedes customer team. So it says one thing about Williams. It says that under Dalton, hey, we are an independent team. We make our own decisions. Mr. Daly, did this move catch you off guard? Were you expecting to see Albon back? And if so, were you expecting to see him with a Mercedes team?
No, I wasn't expecting him to end up at Mercedes. I was very much expecting him to pretty much hold station where he was at Red Bull as like
So
a
did I.
reserve driver or something
So
like
did
that.
I.
I mean, I thought it was going to be Nick that was going to get that seat. But then I thought about it and I thought, well, you know, especially if you're Alex, this makes sense because you're going to a team where there's going to be no pressure. You can go out there. You're not going to be expected to get podiums. You're not going to be expected to win races. You're not there to help try and steal a constructors championship away from Mercedes. So, I mean, he can just go out there and do his own thing. He can just go out there and let Alex be Alex and just go out there and drive and just do what he does best. Because, I mean, I think that, you know, he had the opportunity, obviously, at Red Bull. It didn't work out. And I mean, that's become a bit of, well, let's just call it like it is. It's become a bit of a farce with that second seat and the way that they've rotated guys in and out of that second Red Bull over the past couple of years. So, I mean, that's why it was a bit surprising that they re-signed Sergio Perez, but I guess they kind of sort of had to because who else would they really replace him with? So I think this is a chance for Alex to reinvigorate his Formula One career, and it'll be interesting to see how he does second time around.
And I'd love to hear Vincenzo's thoughts as well, but I just want to read this quote that somebody just
ahead.
sent to me from Jost Capito, team principal at Williams. This just reinforces that message that I shared a couple of minutes ago. And I quote, "I think Toto, at the end, he understands and we understand that we are not a Mercedes B team and we are not a Mercedes satellite team, and that we have to take the decisions that are right for us." And ultimately, they decided that Alex Albon was the right driver. Vincenzo, was that the right move for Williams at this time?
Correct me if I'm wrong. They wanted Valtteri, did they not?
So I think Valtteri was definitely their preference. At least that's been reported that they wanted Valtteri, and that Valtteri had ultimately decided that at this time in his career, Alfa Romeo was a better fit.
Here's the thing. I think by them picking Albon, he's a younger driver. He's more of a future forward driver. And if Williams wants to put kind of draw a line in the sand and say, hey, we're going to bring ourselves back to glory.
Respectability, yeah.
I think you do that with a younger driver and you build it from the bottom. You know, bringing someone, I'm not even saying Valtteri because we just talked about Valtteri ad nauseum. He would probably fit in almost on any team, right? Because he's a great second. You still need a good first. Albon fits. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think the pressure of the bigger teams just got to him when he was there. And like you said, with the Red Bull seat, the second seat is always revolving. Like you don't even, I mean, you could race well and still be worried about your seat there.
Totally.
And as Perez has shown. But yeah, I think Albon's the right choice. I like the kid a lot. I really, really like him. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think he has there's a lot of potential there. And like you said, if Williams is making this clear, like, hey, we're not just this, you know, this feeder program for Mercedes. Like we are our own team. this is a great way to do it. You kind of
Mhm.
you take from you go and take from Red Bull, and like that's perfect. I kind of laughed when I saw the news. I was like, that just makes so much sense, and it'll be interesting to see how they, because Latifi, I don't know what you guys think of Nicholas, Canadian driver. There's talent, right? It's just like, how can they provide the talent with the right, you know, ecosystem around them? I think that's going to be the biggest thing for them to find, is now you have two young, I mean, mostly, I don't want to say inexperienced, but unproven, like, right? They haven't proven themselves in the big leagues yet. So how do they provide what they need around them to get to that next level? And like, can they provide the car? Like, Williams needs to worry about, can we provide a car for whoever sits in our seats
Mhm.
before anything else? So this is a good kind of clean slate for them, I feel like.
It's funny watching Alex go to Williams. It kind of almost sets the stage for kind of like this episode of Jerry Springer of all these spurned Red Bull drivers, and one of them gets on with another team. But anyhow, just talking about Nick, and it's interesting. I think that finally we're seeing that Williams is, their cars, I think it's in a much better place than it's been over the past several years, and I think that we've seen some some signs that that Nick's feeling good in that car. I mean, we've seen some better outings from him over the past 3, 4, maybe 5 races, and so I think I was a little bit surprised, but happy for Nick. I mean, we're always homers when it comes to the the home, the guy, the local boys,
Yeah.
be it anybody from North America. So I was happy to see for him, and I hope that it works out for him as well. Like, I've started to see some flashes of some positive things happening for Nicholas Latifi, so he's got another shot to go around with them again, and I hope it works out for him.
Yeah, and obviously, I'm very excited. I would say that Nicholas Latifi is probably as close to this show as anyone in the Formula One circuit. I'm obviously a big fan. He's a great kid. I think he's shown some real strides over the last couple of weeks and months. Obviously, he scored points at the end of the first half in Hungary. He scored some points in Belgium, which was fantastic. And then, obviously, his qualifying ended in disappointment in Zandvoort, but he was in Q2 with George and looked to have equal pace, which was incredibly exciting to see. I think the team is expecting big things from him. I believe that this is good for him. It's obviously good for Formula One in North America. And on a personal level, I'm also really happy about this, because as long as he's been in Formula One, we've been working through this global pandemic. As a Canadian driver who's very proudly Canadian and wears the maple leaf on his sleeve, and it's literally on the top of his helmet, he's race at home at the Canadian Grand Prix. So this should give him the opportunity to compete at the Canadian Grand Prix in Montreal next summer. And what will be incredibly exciting about that is he'll be lining up on the grid next to another Canadian driver in Lance Stroll, which is very cool. So I think this is a smart move for them. I think he's shown some obvious progression. And I think for Williams as well, as we migrate into the new era and the new world of the 2022 regulations, it's probably good to have some consistency. He's obviously been a part of that journey. He's been helping to develop that 2022 car. And you probably don't want to go into the new era and the new regulations with two new drivers that have no familiarity with the concept of the chassis, the power unit. So this gives you some consistency. And I think ultimately, Alex will be able to learn as much from him as he will from Alex, because obviously Alex has had some experience and has scored a podium and has raced in a much more competitive car.
Absolutely. Hey guys, let's first of all, we should probably start speeding things up a little bit, knowing that Vincenzo's on the East Coast. It's
All
getting
good.
late over there for you.
I'm here for you guys.
That's awesome. We totally appreciate it. But of course, we were saying off the top of the show here, it is the Italian Grand Prix this weekend. It is Monza's one of the most famous circuits in Formula One, in motorsport. The atmosphere at the track is always fantastic. I mean, last year, what with the pandemic and everything, was a bit weird. Not seeing all these passionate fans in the stands, and all the banners and everything like that, and all the celebrations, the big party at the podium celebrations. I mean, especially after Charles won in 2019, which was an epic race in and of itself.
Moment.
Which was great. But let's talk about the race itself, because it is going to be, it's one of the fastest tracks on the circuit. I just pulled up some of the stats here. So it's there's been 90 Italian Grand Prix over the years, first held in 1921. The winningest two drivers there are Michael Schumacher and Lewis Hamilton. They both won it 5 times each. Ferrari, Vincenzo, you'll be happy to know, is the most winningest constructor at the Italian Grand Prix. They've won it 20 times.
That
So
was all in like
Monza,
the 50s and 60s.
well, I mean, and then there was last year. What was it last year? The double DNF?
Yeah. Actually, so if you look behind me, I have the SF1000s.
Oh,
right, yeah.
beautiful.
I have both Vettel and Leclerc, and yeah.
For a guy that's just moved into a new place, you obviously have your priorities, you're well ordered to get unpack certain things.
Certain things had to get unpacked, but
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, just going back to last year, I mean, if you look at the podium, if you don't go back and actually watch the race, I mean, you would do a complete double take, because we saw a first time Grand Prix winner, Pierre Gasly, winning his first and only Formula One race to date, only just less than half a second ahead of Carlos Sainz for McLaren. Obviously, Carlos driving for Ferrari this year, pardon me. And then Lance Stroll rounding out the podium. I mean, that was an eventful race. I mean, there was a number of red flags and safety cars and all that drama. But it's always an exciting track, to watch a Formula One race at. But Vincenzo, maybe give a little bit of context from the cultural point, standpoint of what Ferrari is, what Ferrari means, and just the whole, the passion involved, and how that translates to what happens in the fans at the track on not just race day but the entire weekend.
I mean, motorsport is just a whole nother level, right, for Italians, and to me, it's always begun and ended with Ferrari. You have other, you have Alfa Romeo, you have your Fiat, you have even Lamborghini, who's not even fully Italian anymore, but you have all these other brands. But to me, Ferrari, it meant so much. Like Enzo Ferrari, the way I remember walking through the Enzo Ferrari Museum and reading the contract that Ford had drawn up, and a lot of people probably know this story, but he famously rejected the offer from Ford mainly because he didn't want to give up control of the racing team.
Mm-hmm.
Because to him, the racing team meant everything. If you were fast, if the public equated your name with speed and winning, they'll buy your cars, right? Like selling cars wasn't even was second. That was not even first for Enzo Ferrari. So for Italians, it's like, man, this was an Italian man who started something from scratch, chased a passion, truly a passion. And Italians are known for their passion. I said that earlier in the show, right? Like, we're known for being passionate in everything. And Monza being that track, like that iconic race, this is our, like, it's your home field. Yes, there's other races in Italy as well, but this one is just like, this is the home. Like, this is our house. We are going to show you what it is to be here in Italy. And so, I mean, there's photos that, for those of you that are listening to the show, I urge you to go and look at 2019 when Leclerc won. Just look at photos and some of the video from him celebrating. Like, it's mind blowing to see how, like, you think Zandvoort is crazy when Max drives and he wins his races there. Like, Monza and Italians are like that all the time with Ferrari, all the time. You can go and take a look at Leclerc and Sainz, their stories on Instagram. Carlos, this is really his first time experiencing this, right? And the car, like, Carlos is in the backseat of the car and he's like, just look at this. And people are just like mobbing the car. I mean, it's like that all the time. It's a lifestyle. Goes back to the conversation earlier. It's a lifestyle. Ferrari to me is the ultimate Formula One lifestyle, or ultimate race lifestyle.
Mm-hmm.
That's what they are. You say Ferrari, it literally means like passion. It means speed. It means Italian. Like, that's what it is. Binotto, when he created that essere Ferrari, right? The saying, that hashtag they use, it's all over the cars and stuff.
Yep.
It literally means like, so it translates to be Ferrari, but it's more like the spirit of Ferrari, right? It's the pride of Ferrari. Like, it's literally in their in how they speak and how they brand themselves.
Mhm.
Um, and there's a quote that I wrote down from Binotto about that, and he says that well, actually John Elkann, Ferrari chairman, says that he believes that Essere Ferrari represents the pride of the team, capable of bringing the best of Italy, as well as creativity, enterprise, ingenuity, and heart. It means having the courage to compete, as well as the integrity, passion, and determination. It's a mission statement that furthers Enzo Ferrari's dream. I mean, like, I don't know. To me, like that gives me chills just thinking about it. Like it's they're still following after this man's dream, right? Enzo's dream. Like that is in everything. And it just it oozes in the tifosi, it oozes in the brand itself. Like whether you're fifth in the constructors or whether you're first, those tifosi are going to go crazy no matter what. The it is the ultimate home track advantage for Ferrari to race here. Now, granted, we haven't been doing well there, but it's still one of those things. It's intimidating for another driver to come there and say like, "Wow, these people are not cheering for me. These people do not care about me. They care about the two dudes in the red cars, and that is it."
Yeah.
There's like, you'll probably see very few other fans there, right? It is just dominated by Ferrari, and in the country, like in the entire country, north to south, you see a Ferrari or you see the logo. It's like you almost like walking around the streets with my cousins and my uncles, like, oh look, there's a Ferrari. Oh look look Ferrari hat, Ferrari, like the logo, like it always like incites a little bit of pride. You kind of get a
Mhm.
little pep in your step when you see it. Oh, like, oh look, there's a Ferrari. Like, yeah, I can't afford one, but man, I don't care, right? It's not about affording the car; it's about the fact that what it represents.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's one of those. It's hard to explain in a tangible way, but it is what I would think. Any sport fan would feel if their team like wins a championship. This is like literally every time you see a vehicle or you
Yeah.
see the logo or you just live your life. Like it's life.
Yeah.
Um, and Monza just embodies that. Monza is the date on the calendar that gives us a reason to be at the top of our passion pyramid.
It's just like the way you're describing it. Nothing looks like a Ferrari. Nothing sounds like a
No,
Ferrari. And moreover, if you get close enough to one or lucky enough to drive one, nothing feels like a Ferrari when it goes by, and it just the power that you can feel coming out of that the car is really
I
quite
still
something.
remember the first time I drove one. Right, like the first
Hmm.
time I got into a Ferrari, I was just like it kind of like washed over me. I felt like, wow, this is a real like this is a Ferrari. Like
Hmm.
I don't the name itself, just the name itself. You like just saying it feels there's something about the word itself. It's become so synonymous with certain things that it just the vibes it gives you is just different, right?
Hmm.
You could say Mercedes, but like, that doesn't feel like even just saying it now doesn't okay. Like, and I drive one, like, and it like yeah, it's all right. But oh, I have a Ferrari. Oh, okay. Like, there's just a whole different vibe there.
Yeah, absolutely. And Monza too, is really an incredible track. There is a video up
Mm,
on YouTube. It's on the Formula One official channel, and I've tweeted out a couple of times over the years because it's nothing new. It's been up there for a long time. It's maybe not a completely relevant because I think that the fastest lap in Formula One has now been bettered. I
mm,
think Kimi maybe did it a couple of years ago at Monza itself, but it was taken back, and I think in 2003, 2004, and it stood for the longest time. It was the fastest lap in Formula One. It was set by Juan Pablo Montoya driving the Williams at Monza that year.
mm.
And it is awesome. I'll just go to YouTube and just search for like Juan Pablo Montoya and Monza, and it is just absolutely incredible to watch. I mean, just the sounds of the first of all the car, and he's driving a Williams. He's not driving a a Ferrari there. But that being said, I mean, it is really quite incredible to see and just to experience that lap. But I mean, if you can, it's fun to watch on your phone, but if you can watch on your laptop or even on your TV, it's even better. But it is just absolutely amazing. I mean, the track itself is really quite phenomenal. I mean, it's still kind of sort of adheres to parts of the spirit of the old track. I mean, the Parabolica is not the Parabolica of old, but I mean, it really is flat out most of the way. I mean, it's fairly long. It's just over 5.75 miles long. Or sorry, yeah, that's 5.5 kilometers long, or 3.6 miles. Total race distance is just under 307 kilometers, or 190, just under 191 miles, 53 laps. And it's always an exciting one to get to watch. I was just looking. Pirelli are bringing their mid-range tires, the C2 hards, C3 mediums, and the C4 softs. And looking at the weather for Sunday, it's not going to be too bad. Looking at 2 o'clock local time, it's calling to be sunny, highs of 84 degrees Fahrenheit, which is about 29 degrees Celsius. And more importantly, it looks like they're forecasting rain and thunder showers, but that's not till the middle of the week. Race day, and specifically Sunday, is looking like it's going to be, it's going to be, perfect conditions. Let's put it that way. So, Mark, I think you're going to get to it here, but I'm gonna beat you to the punch. So now this is where the rubber meets the road. This is where I ask you guys for some predictions. Who's going to win this weekend? Because Red Bull have been kind of throwing out there. I don't know if this is diversionary. They've been saying, I think that or we think that Mercedes is going to have the edge here this weekend, and I don't know if like I said, that's a bit of mis or disinformation, and the sort of kind of it's a strategical thing. But it based on what we saw with when Max is on form and the car's good, I mean, that's an unbeatable package. And we know the same thing with Lewis and Mercedes is, exactly the same situation. But it's going to be who's going to be the best on that day, and moreover, which car is going to have the slight edge over the other. I don't know. I mean, honestly, this one I think is a little bit too close to call at this point.
I agree. And I think the other thing that we probably haven't done enough to promote over the last couple of weeks is this is round 2 of the sprint qualifying format.
Yes,
so
great.
We'll see qualifying 9-10 hours from this moment. So for me, that means that my 9 to 10 a.m. window in my calendar is mysteriously blocked off, and I won't be answering any work calls.
Yeah, it's weird how that happens.
Sorry to my employer for that. But we also get sprint qualifying Saturday morning, 7:30 a.m. Pacific time, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So we kind of have 2 predictions to make here, which is obviously we have sprint qualifying on Saturday, which is worth 3 points to the winner on this really major mega power circuit. And then we have the Grand Prix on Sunday. So there's kind of an opportunity for redemption if you don't cash in a meaningful way. I feel the same way that you do, Mark. And I know this is a bit of a cop-out from a commentator's perspective, but I could kind of go either way. Ultimately, I have more confidence in Mercedes as a constructor just because I've seen so many errors out of Sergio over the course of the last couple of weeks and really the last couple of months. But ultimately, for me, it's a toss-up between Max and Lewis. Obviously, Max has all the momentum in the world right now. He's qualified on pole in the last 2 Grand Prix. He's won 2 races in a row. Lewis has only won 1 of the last 9 races, which is the worst streak that he and Mercedes has had going back to 2012. It's been a long time since they've struggled like this. But that said, they're still only a couple of points out of leading the driver's title, and they are still winning the constructor's title. So to me, it's a bit of a throw up. I'm going to lean into Mercedes. I can't believe that Red Bull would come out and dominate 3 Grand Prix in a row coming out of the summer break. I feel like this track's probably better attuned to Mercedes. And I think one of the things we have to remember too is that if you look at the analysis and the data from the race at Zandvoort, Mercedes was faster in the straights. It's just that the Red Bull cars were generating so much more downforce into the corners or through the corners that they were able to build that lead that Mercedes ultimately couldn't touch. Cornering less important here. Downforce and corners less important because it's more of a gradual oval in a lot of ways. But I think I'm going to put my money on Mercedes this weekend. Vincenzo, your country, Italy, your passion, who are you going to lean into this weekend?
You kind of took it from me there. This track is something like 80% or so full throttle.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm going to say that Mercedes is going to take the qualifying, the sprint, they may win the sprint, and I do think Red Bull ends up winning the race itself.
Oh,
I'm gonna say there might be like a slow pit from Mercedes, and I think on the podium we'll probably see Verstappen, Hamilton, and I think Carlos Sainz is going to sneak his way up there. He's going to get that first Monza experience as a Ferrari driver. I think he might get a little bit of luck. I think Sainz is going to get up on the podium.
And, after he came so close to winning it last year, I mean, if that race had gone even one lap, I mean, he would have taken that victory instead of Gasly. I mean, that's without question, and
right there.
Yeah. I mean, that was just amazing.
I think he's done a great. Sainz done a really good job this year changing car. I mean, he's changed cars how many times in the last few years? He's done a very good job learning the Ferrari, getting right in and succeeding. I don't know. I'm going to throw Sainz up on the podium.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think he's done, out of the class of drivers of 2020, 2021 who switched teams, Carlos is the guy that I think adapted better than anyone else. And I think that he's got to be my sort of unsung hero of 2021. I think a lot of the things that he's done so far this year's kind of flown under the radar a little bit to a certain extent. Yeah. So, Mark, are you going to be a little bit more bold, or are you going to stick? Are you going to keep sitting on the fence?
Yeah, I'll go
because the listeners will put you on blast now.
They always do. I get slandered, and deservedly so. I'm going to throw Lewis on the top of the podium. I think Max will be second. I think third is a toss up. I don't have any confidence in Sergio right now. I've been really disappointed with some of the mental unforced errors we've seen out of him the last couple of weeks. Again, I get it. He makes a mistake and he carves his way through the pack. I don't think you deserve credit for that because you shouldn't have been in that position to start with. But I like where Vincenzo was going, which is putting a Ferrari driver on the podium. And we know that team has had a really strong turn in the second half of the first half of the season. They're third in the constructors right now. We know they're about to unlock some really significant power with that power unit with some upgrades that are coming. They're not going to be delivered from Monza, unfortunately, but I'm going to put Charles Leclerc on the podium with Max and Lewis. And I think as Vincenzo just explained, are going to go bananas. I think they would be ecstatic with a podium, even if it's not a win.
You actually stole my podium, so I don't know if that's great minds think alike or something. But yeah, I was going to say Lewis, top of the podium, Max, and then I was going to throw Charles on there. Why not? I mean, when it comes to Monza, when it comes to the Italian Grand Prix, you got to show Ferrari a little bit of love, and especially what Charles did a couple of years ago. That was awesome. The way that he held off, the two Mercedes over, basically was it 90% of that race, if not more. It was
pretty much.
Yeah,
and I think Lando gets back into the top 5 this week.
Yeah,
he gets back on.
Good call. Good call.
They were oddly off pace in Holland last weekend. I mean, it was weird to see how those two McLarens struggled, but hopefully to see him, come back around. But hey, guys, before we wrap it up here, I just want to kind of finish with kind of a comment. Vincenzo, you mentioned off the top, when you made your trip to Italy not so long ago, how your cousins say, you hear you got to eat pasta all the time. Reminded me of my buddy Jesus, and whenever he goes back to Spain, to Madrid to visit, family, he measures the success of his trip home by the amount of weight that he's gained by the time that he gets back to Canada. It's just like, fantastic. And every year, like that goal weight kind of goes back up, so it's just like, I need to gain whatever it is. Then he spends the other 11 months of the year working it off so he can go back and then just gorge himself the entire time. And hey, what's wrong with that?
Nothing. Absolutely nothing.
Yeah. Well, Vincenzo, it's been awesome having you here tonight, man. It's been a load of fun. Before we let you go, just let everybody know where they can follow you online, website, social media channels, and all that good stuff.
Just go check me out over on VincenzoLandino.com. Vincenzo Landino on Twitter. Not .com. Vincenzo Landino on Twitter. I'm really good at interacting there. I love to interact with people there. Totally. So yeah, just come follow me and you can get all my info right from there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much again. Enjoy the race this weekend. We really look forward to doing this again with you sometime soon. And we're going to, it's that time to start turning off the lights and get out of here. It's, awesome that, made such a, the opportunity to come with us, and it was so late for you. And
No worries.
I'm
Thanks
ready
for
to
having me.
shut it down. And again, if you want to follow us, best way is on Twitter at ScuderiF1Pod. You can email us at ScuderiF1Pod@gmail.com. Enjoy the race. We'll be back on Sunday night, as we do every race weekend, to recap it. On behalf of myself and Mr. Mark Hamilton and our special guest, Mr. Vincenzo Landino, thank you all for listening. Have a great weekend, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon. Bye for now.